Director, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and specifically how the engaged in the business language may have broadened your ability to perform background checks, and what impact that then has on other agencies' ability to successfully prosecute things like the straw purchasing and gun trafficking provisions in that law.
So certainly BISCA was an important piece of legislation that has added to our authorities at NICS in particular in a number of ways in terms of additional background checks for the so-called U21 group in particular. And I think that's important because as I go around talking to state and local law enforcement, and I've been in talked to law enforcement in all 50 states, I believe, easily in this job. One of the two recurring themes you'll hear on violent crime is the role of juveniles and the role of mental health. Mm-hmm. Almost every group, no matter what state I'm talking to. And so the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act does, I think, take an important step in the right direction in terms of addressing that specific part of the threat. The part that you're asking about is more in ATF's lane, but we work very closely with ATF on our Safe Streets and Violent Crimes task forces, and we're always looking for the strongest violation to disrupt the threat. And so whether it's straw purchaser cases or things like that, I know when I was a line prosecutor, I tried a number of straw purchaser cases. Those are important tools. And so often that's one of the best violations to kind of dismantle a violent crime threat.
One of the other things that we haven't, I don't think, adequately addressed in the law yet, but which is skyrocketing, is these ghost guns or privately made firearms. Law enforcement has seen a 1,000% increase in recoveries between 2016 and 2021. In 2022, we had a ghost gun was used to shoot and kill a 16-year-old at West Mesa High School in Albuquerque. And I wish that were a completely isolated case. What is the FBI doing to recover and prevent assembly of ghost guns? And what tools, maybe even more importantly, do you need from the Congress to be able to get your hands around this challenge?
So I would say ghost guns, as you say, represent a real challenge for law enforcement because the kits are cheap and widely available and undercut the ability to trace the firearm and in effect end up undermining the background investigation process. And unfortunately, we are seeing ghost guns more and more in violent crime and gang investigations. Now, as to authorities, you're really talking more ATF in terms of regulation or even legislation, but we do coordinate closely. Whenever we seize ghost guns as part of a takedown, we're obviously working closely with ATF on that. As to other things that Congress can do to help, at the risk of answering every question with the same answer, we need Congress to restore the progress that was made in 23 so that we can sustain our efforts against violent crime and sustain our work in terms of denials of firearms to the people who are legally prohibited from having them.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, and I suspect it will be a similar answer, we made some progress recently with the Fend Off Fentanyl Act that was really designed to prevent fentanyl from getting inside the United States in the first place, but you have to deal with it once it's already here. You mentioned funding and the potential impact that the budget could have on your ability to disrupt that flow. Feel free to reiterate the importance of that and then also touch on other tools that you may need that to address the sort of crisis that we are seeing in communities all across this country.
So we are finding most of the fentanyl that we seize at the FBI is fentanyl that's already here in the United States, and what we're finding is that something like 70% of it is coming up in violent gang takedowns. So that shows you kind of firsthand the nexus between the fentanyl problem and the violent crime problem and some of the most dangerous offenders. And it is not unusual not unusual for the FBI, for any given field office, to seize enough fentanyl in one takedown to have wiped out an entire state.
God.
And so if you start thinking about the impact of the cuts that we've been talking about in this hearing, that's fewer seizures, that's more pills on the market, that's more people dying. I mean, just put it as bluntly as that. And that's just looking at it that way. And of course, we also have all these investigations into cartel leadership. And again, the cuts impact that if we're going to be serious about going after the cartels. Among the other things that we're doing to try to tackle the fentanyl problem, we have an initiative called J-Code that aggressively targets darknet trafficking of fentanyl. We just last year had an operation called Spector that was the largest ever, I think, takedown of darknet trafficking marketplace of fentanyl and other dangerous, synthetic opioids. So that's an important part of our work. I know in your home state of Albuquerque, I just remembered off the top of my head, was a great takedown that they did where they were seizing enough fentanyl to wipe out like an entire state, along with, again, back to the nexus with violence, along with hand grenades, ballistic vests, the whole 9 yards. So the fentanyl problem and the violent crime problem are inextricably linked, and of course the fentanyl problem is directly tied to the problems from the other side of the border.
So not a great time to cut his budget.
Certainly it's not. It's unfortunate we have another